Hello, everybody, and welcome back to episode 5 of Lexi and Raegan Tries.
Woo!
Yeah!
Today we are doing a different kind of segment where we're going to study the media and we're going to study Wicked.
The new movie that came out starring Ariana Grande.
Yeah, so this movie came out November 22nd of this year for part 1, and then part 2 is going to come out November
21st
of
2025. Yep. And yeah, it's very, very emotional for a lot of people, especially if you read the book are a fan of The Wizard of Oz and the Broadway. Hey, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the flying monkey in the room, if you will. That it was such a big hit on Broadway. It debuted in 2003. It has been, I saw it 2 years ago in New York. It's very good. And so I was very excited to see this. We went into it looking for ways that, transferable media from book to, stage play versus film. I don't know why that was so hard for me to say. And also, we went into it with eyes on how gender is represented.
Yes. So obviously, Wicked has had a big impact on society as well as just Wizard of Oz in general. I have a big bias towards the Wizard of Oz and really just the Land of Oz franchise in general. I grew up around that. It's in my Letterboxd top 5. I won't take any slander on that. Because I've got a lot of feedback on that, but I don't care actually. And I think most of it is because of how groundbreaking it was and just how everything reverts back to those concepts discussed in Wizard of Oz, and I think Wicked takes that in a direction. Which direction? One direction.
I kind of think it's refreshing because I'm not the hugest fan of Wizard of Oz. I don't particularly love that movie. Nothing to do with the way it's made. It's just, I don't know. I've watched it, but I'm just that's a movie that I've seen once and I could never see again and I'd be okay. I have a much better appreciation after being in the world of Wicked, because I feel like that is the way that Wicked goes about showing a different perspective of the Wizard of Oz. I feel like that is more often the case of how a lot of actual real life stories go. People who we think are the heroes or the good people are not usually the good people. And so I find that very refreshing to show something on the nose of that sort of nature, and that's why I have a really big respect for Wicked, and I would 100% watch Wicked over Wizard of Oz. My bad. But that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those things that they could have taken in many directions. They could have had the Wizard of Oz be the main lead, and they could have had Fiyero be a main lead in this, but they did decide to take 2 strong female characters to lead the story and to tell the story in their own way, and then also reshape what we think is wickedness and what is evil and how society portrays certain things. Wicked is depicting our world in a way, but also is doing it in a fantastical way that it doesn't feel like it's being shoved down your throat.
It hits home, but it's not oh my God, that could be my neighbor, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with it would not have been as successful if they would have picked Fiyero or another person, because I think a lot of women go through similar cases of this, where it's not to, the degree, but of being not taken seriously or being held by your appearance and nothing else. And if it doesn't fit the thing, you are not, it doesn't matter what you are. If you're smart, if you're talented or anything like that, if you don't look the part or you look a certain way, a lot of times you're cast aside. And I think that this does a lot to bring to say it doesn't matter.
Bouncing off your point, I feel in womanhood, we're supposed to have these dreams and stuff of things that we can be and things that we can achieve, and then something can happen, you have children or you have other responsibilities, and those dreams are just kind of casted aside. But I think it's an important point that Elphaba says, takes her own journey in her own path instead of following something that everyone is supposed to.
And it's definitely about what is right and wrong. And I mean, race is also a very big undertone, if you will, of this, with the animals and whatnot being silenced. I think that's very, very on the nose. If you do any sort of critical thinking towards this film, it's very obvious that that is what it is trying to get at, where it's like fear-mongering for no reason.
I also enjoyed the little Easter eggs of all of the Wizard of Oz moments in there as well. Like, you have Toto in the basket, on the bike. You have, you know, you have like the cub, who is theorized to be the cowardly lion in this part. You have Poppies and like that relation to how Fiyero doesn't get, you know, sleepy with the Poppies. The Scarecrow in the Wizard of Oz doesn't get sleepy with the Poppies. All these like little interconnected pieces and little Easter eggs, as you will, throughout the film. I think that obviously Broadway did it first. The movie is just like reiterating that, but I think that visually it was cool to see how they represented that in the film, where they don't have to use stage adaptation, they don't have to use set design, and that way they can literally show you straight up what it is.
Literally, it's with the film, it was very much, they had a lot more they could do. This is feeling like I'm getting around to the point of what I was trying to get to, so I'm just going to say it in different words. I had like a really solid sentence that's just gone forever. I think it's also a really good depiction of how unreliable history can be, because with just the Wizard of Oz, the Wicked Witch will just be known as some evil, like wicked person, when in reality she was forced into that position, and even so she wasn't wicked. She's doing it out of a place of kindness and honestly selflessness, because she could have easily just agreed and just gone along with the wizard's plan, but she knows that it's wrong what they are doing to the animals. So the whole film brings up the question of, is wickedness born or made? And I think that that's very important, considering like we are oftentimes, we want to be united against a common enemy.
It's okay.
A common enemy. Elphaba is a very clear case of that, where she was just given the worst hand of cards since the beginning, and it wasn't her fault, but she's deemed as wicked because it's easier to be afraid of change and be afraid of something different than you, and to be united on that than it is to stand out and stand against, which I think Glinda figures out about halfway through.
I think that middle scene of Elphaba going into the dance and like doing her own interpretive thing, and
Very Wednesday coded, by the way.
it was very Wednesday coded.
Very Wednesday coded.
But like, I cried during that. I was like, that was such a powerful moment, and I know that Ariana Grande like went into it not practicing it because she wanted it to be as authentic as possible, that she was just following Elphaba's lead. And I think that it really showed in that, because you could just see how powerful that decision to stand up for Elphaba is, and how, yes, you can take your own stance and you can, you know, battle societal's expectations on your own, but you are really so much stronger when you are together.
You could tell in that scene that she was really Elphaba, and she had a part where she like kind of shuddered when she cried, and I'm not a baller, so like that's not what I meant. That's what I thought of though. I'm not like a, you know, sobber, if you will. I really relate to having something where it's like it hurts, but you don't want people to see it, so you're just like, but it's still like coming out a little bit, and like that's more powerful to me than if you can sob. And I think that was truly a true emotion. That was a very powerful scene, and I think it would have been easier for Glinda to just go along with things. It does show that, because we're not supposed to like Glinda in the very beginning. She's not. There are no redeeming qualities. She's selfish. She's self-absorbed. She thinks the world revolves around her. That's not a character that is supposed to be likable. But we realize, I think Glinda's also supposed to be us as well, because it's like, we are inherently selfish and self-absorbed beings. It's just, that's what comes with being conscious. I think that shows though, like, you can, you know, and you can be like, wait a minute, other people have feelings and I affect them? And it shows that even the most damning of cases, such as Glinda in the beginning, only child syndrome, you know, no offense to the only children out there. Also, like, sisterhood, dude. Like, they shared a room, they hated each other, loathing. There's a little whole freaking sequence over it. They did not like each other. But even after, like, all of that, I'm sure Glinda sees herself a little bit in that, because she knows. She's just, like, there's something inherently about girlhood that also just I feel brings people together. I also think it's very interesting how, in the Broadway production, Fiyero kind of is not as accepting, I feel, as this one. He first meets Elphaba. I feel like he immediately, like he was like, oh, okay. And like he wasn't like, or anything, but he was just like, oh, okay. And then like all over Galinda, which is kind of the case in this one, but the way that Jonathan Bailey plays him, he's very accepting very quickly.
I did, yeah. Jonathan Bailey, Fiyero is a little more zesty, if
Yeah,
you will.
say.
I think it does do a lot of justice for his character because we're not really supposed to like care about him as much. But the way that he is like immediately kind of like in awe of Elphaba the moment that they meet, you know, he's like, wait,
You don't care.
she doesn't know who I am? She doesn't care?
She's not falling at my feet in love with me. Yeah.
Yeah. He also didn't make it like, oh my God, now I have to get her.
It wasn't Gastonified.
Yeah. So that was refreshing. And his whole dancing sequence was beautifully. I liked it a lot. I know that like that was probably one of the top musical numbers.
Showstopper for sure.
Don't make me laugh. They were popular. Right!
Maybe I just missed this in part of it, but this is a question I wanted to raise. You can probably answer it better for me. Why did he not fall asleep when the poppies?
It kind of comes back to like the timeline between Wicked and the Wizard of Oz, and pretty much it is explained more in part 2 of Wicked, but I'll try not to spoil it as much as possible. But pretty much because Fiyero has these feelings for Elphaba, Elphaba has this feeling that she should protect him with her magic, whether it's conscious or not conscious. That's how he kind of ends up in the scarecrow position.
Yeah.
It happens in part 2, but pretty much
Yeah.
she like casts a spell, and that spell turns him into a scarecrow because he can't be hurt if he's a scarecrow.
Mm.
Yeah, she protected him, and that caused him to, you know, see a different part of Elphaba.
I also thought it was very interesting how he did not ask any questions. He said, I'm getting the cub, let's go.
Yeah.
And which is interesting to me because I think in the show, in the Broadway show, I think he asked a little bit more. He was like, well, what? And like had her explain a bit more. But this one, she was just like, and he said, that's a good, all right. Like, I'll follow you to the ends of the earth, basically.
And I'll take the journey.
Which I'm like, aw, but also like, not real. Also, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Ethan Slater. Tell me why. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. That one interview with that smile that he did, why was it in the movie? Why was it in the movie? Why did he in the freaking movie? That threw me off guard. I literally looked at Alexei and said, what are we doing?
Reagan goes,
I was like, are you serious? Like, no shade, no hate, or something like that to Ethan Slater. Like, he obviously is in that position for a reason, but it's also just like,
it was a jump scare.
it was. Frankly, I'm disturbed.
It was distracting.
Toss.
Also, can I freak it on here? I'm gonna be honest. Not like that. I'm gonna be honest. Elphaba's sister is so annoying. I do not like her. Like, I get it, she has her own, like, plights and stuff, but her sister has been forced to be, and then maybe this is the older sister in me, but, like, she literally, all right, middle child. She only has been forced to, I mean, she cares for her sister, but, like, Elphaba's been forced by her father to, like, care and only, like, to send to her sister in her life, and her sister's so ungrateful. I would have slapped her.
If my sister didn't stand up for me, I would not save her in any situation.
Yeah.
Like, I would have let that I don't even know, that professor person wheel her to her room. I don't care.
Yeah.
Because what do you mean she's not going to stand up for me?
She's not really up here. No, but seriously, like,
She just values her own
journey,
reputation.
her own reputation, and she's always talking about her fresh start.
Yeah.
Okay, you are in a wheelchair. You still are not being, like, discriminated against. They both are being, like, treated differently, but Elphaba's being shunned, you are being coddled. And I think, dare I say, there are some people in this world that are like that like to compare things. Not to get a little bit crazy. I feel like a lot of religious people are like the little sister, where they are hindered because of one tiny thing. Maybe they are a niche group, and they use that to like victimize themselves against people like, I don't know, people of color who are actually, you know, and I mean, both have like struggles, don't get me wrong, but like,
Yeah, I think that's a big topic right now in terms of like Christianity and how like a lot of Gen Z is kind of pushing back against those particular beliefs and like the idea of religion in general.
yeah, it's not even just Christianity, it's just like the systemic religion.
Yeah. And like they kind of compare it to like having a hate crime against them.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, maybe in some ways, but to the degree, no.
No.
Because you're always going to have your freedom of religion. Like,
Right
that's
now-
guaranteed.
Right now, you're not being hunted, killed, hated on, against, maybe a little bullied online because you are XYZ religion. Well, because I'm sure there's some religions that's happening. I'm just going to use Christianity for this example. Because you're a Christian. That is not happening in a mass scale right now. If you hate it so much, stand up for yourself. If you hate it so much, say something and say, hey, I don't like that, stop. Instead of going and like complaining about something and comparing it to something otherworldly. Like, this past couple months, I've heard more things compared to the Holocaust than should ever be compared. But that's just like a very, you know, it's a very much like, it's a parallel, but it's very faint. It's not like, that's not the point of the movie, is that. But I think that there are parallels to be drawn between these two topics. And just the way society, you know, works. It's very, you know, against. And I mean, literally, like, I don't think it's that far off to bring religious into it, considering they burn like, the first sequence. They burn a statue, I guess. It's not really a statue, a monument of whatever. They created something of like out of wood of the Wicked Witch and set it on fire. And I'm like, if that's not witch trials, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Like,
That's one thing that I do appreciate about Wicked is just its relation to society, but it's not like, hey, this is everything wrong with society and this is how to fix it. It's literally just being like, hey,
Something to
if
think
you use your
about.
brain, you could kind of see the similarities here.
yeah.
And then you can still have fun and be in this fantastical world, but you can still gain lessons from it. And I think at the core of entertainment, that is probably one of the most important things that a filmmaker can do is make you leave feeling something. And whether you didn't like Wicked or whether you did like Wicked or wherever you are on that spectrum, the director did make you feel something, and I think that is the most that you can ask as a filmmaker.
I think there are a lot of complex in topics or like concepts, if you will, of like what we were talking about, and they have like a depth that unless you don't think about it, you could just go into this and be like, oh, it's just a story. But it's like, it truly is. And I think it's kind of timeless because it could be applied to the 50s. It could be applied to now. It could be, it could be, these concepts are not new to us. We've seen them before. We understand like, oh, the underdog, oh, we want to, like, you know, this, we understand that. And I think this also shows that nobody's going to be a perfect fit. And I think that's very important right now, especially upon election season.
Yeah.
I think it's very important to know and to remember that putting any sort of politician on a godlike tier is not a good idea. Because most of the time they are not what they are. Like they are not what they promise. No one politician is going to save anybody, and I think that is very evident with Wizard and how he's literally idolized, like god tier, like pray to the wizard type thing. Literally, what do they say? Oh, my Ozness. Oh,
Yeah.
like it's
What
king,
the Oz?
god.
It's
Literally, it's very much like a god-like tier thing, and he's just a man. That's at the end of the day. We just got to remember they are just people. Putting any sort of thing like that is bound to backfire. It also is just like, Alphaba's not perfect, and they don't try to make her perfect. They show like she is subject to manipulation. She is subject to, you know, she gets her whips of like her grips eventually, but she is subject to being to hurting. And I think a lot of times we're like, oh, don't care about what other people think, blah blah blah. But we do care a little bit, and it's just not letting it bother you.
Yeah.
And I think, and it's also, I mean, it's okay to let it like sink in and to feel it and to let your emotions through. I think Alphaba is a great representation of what somebody trying to learn how to use their emotions.
Yeah.
There's so many lessons to be gaining from this, and the importance of having community in some way. I feel like moral responsibility is often thrust upon us from society on what we should deem is right, wrong, XYZ, and most of the time it is wrong, or it is inherently wrong, and we do not agree with it, but because the mass does, we should. And I think that this movie is a very good thing. It's like, it's okay to stand out and be different. Like, it's more important to get philosophical. I think this movie is getting at it is more important to follow your morals and to know what is, like, do it right and wrong than it is to be popular.
Yeah.
Right.
Thoughts on Elphaba and Glinda portraying Disney princess?
Excellent question. Oh my gosh, there was a literal sequence of the I don't know about Disney princess, but this is a very common trope, and it's seen in Barbie and other places where it's like, if she take off her glasses, then all of a sudden she is hot. And it's like, they try to do that in the popular sequence, and it's just like, I liked how instead of being like, she takes it off and is like, you're better now, she puts it back on, she says, keep it on.
Oh no, honey, no.
No, which I think she looks great regardless. She's a gorgeous girl, but it's like, it doesn't. I think that in a way shows like glasses, and she like tries on the different glasses instead of just trying to take them off entirely.
Yeah.
It's like you don't have to be blind in order to be loved. Like literally. Who do you think, based on like the Disney princesses, if you will, who do you think Glinda most represents, and who do you think Elphaba is most represented by?
I think Elphaba is giving some Elsa.
Yeah.
Just in like following her own path and not letting other things take over, and then also being protective of her sister, obviously.
And learning just like how to balance her emotions within her powers and stuff too, which is a fantastical take, but you know.
Yeah. Now, I don't know about Glinda.
Glinda plays
She's very ditzy.
But that's the thing, she plays being ditzy. I think she knows what she's doing.
She does.
I think she knows exactly what she's doing. She knows how to manipulate people. There's literally a part where Fiyera's like, oh, you're good. Because she gets Bach to do exactly what she wants him to do.
Yeah.
She's ditzy because it's like, oh, well, I'm the innocent girl, but she knows exactly what she's doing. I don't know what Disney princess I would put it in, because I think that's the flaw of it all. It's like, you know, you can be nice, but if you're manipulative, that doesn't mean you're a good person.
Yeah. And that's what, like, we're supposed to be like, oh my God. I mean, in Wizard of Oz, we're like, the good witch. Like, she's awesome, she's wonderful. And then Wicked's like, hey, she's actually very manipulative.
Yeah, she is, you know.
She gets what she wants.
There's literally a line she has where she's like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I didn't get what I wanted. And it's like, you know, and it's funny, like we laugh or whatever, but it's like.
She genuinely was like, what do I do?
It's literally a kind of another thing to parallel to our society. It just shows how some adults never actually grew up. And it's like, there are real adults that act like her today. So it's just like, I think it's funny, and I think, honestly, I feel like Glinda's more us than she is a Disney princess.
I agree.
She's a little on the nose and no subtlety about it, but there is some things where we have like, you know, and we're all guilty of it, being like well, I did this and I did this. I didn't do this, I didn't do what this person did, therefore I'm good. I think they both represent us, but I do think Glinda she's got dirty laundry, if you will.
Yeah. She is more human in a way, and like, obviously Elphaba has a lot of challenges and a lot of things going wrong in her life, and she, you know, takes the moral high ground, but I feel like Elphaba is this being that we're supposed to try to look up to.
Don't make me laugh. They were popular. Right!
Another thing I would like to critique, actually. Critique number one. I think the girlhood that is represented in the song, and just area of popular, that part of the movie, is very shallow. Shoes, hair, makeup, how to talk to boys, flipping your hair, etc., etc. Being the only toss. Literally, like that being I think it's supposed to be in a way like showing how ridiculous this idea of what a girl is it could be, but people who don't critically think about stuff like that will be like, oh yeah, that's a girl. That's what girls do. That's what girls care about. And it's like, no. Like I was thinking about existentialism as a freaking 9-year-old. I was not thinking about like, how do I put my hair up? I was like, I'm real. Ugh. So I think that just representing girlhood it's very disheartening seeing girls being like so shallow, and there's no depth. And it's just like on surface level like things where it's like, no, we have brains and we think. And it's like, well, because when guys grow up, it's like, you know, they're learning how to be strong and independent and how to have problem solving skills. We're like, yes, girls figure that out sometimes before them, but it's just very common for that to be like, you know, lost, I guess.
Yeah. I do agree that it was very, very superficial, and I didn't really appreciate that. But one thing I did appreciate was that, like, once Elphaba was, like, starting to do the hair toss, you know, like, Fiyero was like, you don't have to do that. Like, you're not, like, he doesn't value as a person if you do that.
I think that's a double-edged sword, too, because I'm like, why do you need a man to tell you that it's
Yeah.
okay to do it or not? But it's
Yeah.
also at the same time, it's like nice to be like, oh, you can be loved or whatever without having to be superficial. Society shouldn't create a space where somebody to tell you what you should,
Okay.
what you can and can't do. You should be able to just do it, do whatever you want.
You kind of see society rubbing off on Elphaba a little bit as
For
time
sure.
progresses, and, like, yes, that is, like, a little bit disheartening.
And also, you know, I don't know if Elphaba actually ever understood Glinda's intentions with giving her the hat. She's used to being laughed at, so she could just be like, oh, I'm just in the room, I'm getting laughed at, it's not about my hat. I don't know if she understands that kind of betrayal before they were friends, which is completely derailing from the topic, but that's just something that came to my head.
I don't know either, because, like, I know in the crowd a lot of people were, like, making fun of the hat. They're like, oh, it goes like this and it goes like that way.
That's true.
Like, all of that random stuff. She took it off, and then when she was about to do her dance, she put it back on consciously.
I
So
guess.
maybe she kind of knew, but maybe she didn't know that, like, Glinda's intentions was to embarrass her.
Yeah.
Because she did try to, like, give Glinda a chance with Miss Marble.
100%. She literally did Glinda such a solid, and that's what made Glinda be like, oh, maybe I am a bitch. Like,
Am I the
maybe, am I the Reddit? And part of me felt like it was honestly not a conscious choice. It was just like, oh, this is the right thing to do, I'm just gonna do it, kind of a thing. But then, as time goes on, they do become best friends.
there's a little touch of selfishness in that relationship for Glinda, because I feel like Glinda is using Elphaba just to get her in to be a witch, to be a witch.
Yep.
And I don't think that she would have been friends at all with Elphaba if it wasn't for the fact that Miss Marble was teaching her. I'm interested to see where they go in part 2 and how they portray Glinda. And
I agree.
how her character makes choices.
I would love to see more on how her character progression, because she is very much more knowledgeable when she's like, you know, after the Wicked Witch and everything, and she obviously knows what happened.
Yeah, I mean, even
To
in the
Elphaba.
beginning, like you see Glinda kind of when they're burning.
She's
the
like,
replica of the Wicked Witch. Like, she's like, that is kind of bad, but I'm not going to stop it.
I think and if you don't know the story, then that's just too bad. Go on.
Why are you watching?
Literally. But if you like know the story, I think it's definitely because if Elphaba was going to be back into society and have no things, I think Glinda would have been like, that's enough, you need to knock it off. But because to sell the story that Elphaba was dead, she's not. Yeah, to sell that story, Glinda needed to let that version of her die. The world would forget or move on, and she could live in peace, and people wouldn't be actively hunting her anymore. I mean, Glinda won. She is like the ruler, basically.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing else for her to gain except to reflect on how she was and
How she treated people.
Yeah.
My second critique is just like production-wise. I know that they were trying to take a more naturalistic
oh, I see what this is.
portrayal of the Land of Oz, and they used a lot of backlighting and natural lighting, and I did not like it. I think it really washed out a lot of the colors, and I've seen like a lot of reviews being like, oh, like the person who color graded this was really bad, like the colors are really off, and I think it literally was just the fact that there was no like lighting that was trying to point out anything. Like literally my favorite lighted moment of the whole movie was in Popular, where everything was just lit in pink. When I think of The Wizard of Oz and I think of Wicked, like I think of Technicolor and like beautiful sets. Emerald City was like a dull green. It wasn't fantastical, and I know that they're trying to make it naturalistic in a way. I just think that if you're making something we already know is a thing and we've already seen be done a lot of times you have to like step that up in terms of colors. And I think they also just threw a bunch of colors and was like, hey, there's colors, so it's colorful, instead of using like color theory and being like, hey, this stands out, like green and pink stand out from each other because they're opposite on the color wheels. Like actually using color theory, I think it was just like a lot of color and a lot of poor lighting that made it seem dull.
For another production thing, I think it was very well done with some of the shots and some of the framework. Like there's one specific one that stuck with me where is during the very special dance that brings Glinda and Elphaba together, and it is a perfect shot of Elphaba's doing the dance and her arm is like this and the camera is back here and you see it's focused in on Glinda's face. So many symbolic things that you could take with that. I think like it could be looked at as a mirror that Glinda is seeing herself in Elphaba a little bit, because it's like the shape of like a circle in a mirror and like she's looking at herself, if you will. But it also can just be like of a recognition with her mimicking to say like, I understand you. Topic switch! I think that another thing that this movie really harps on is like the importance of history. And again, to circle back to what I was talking about with how like history oftentimes is written by the winner, or like who wants to take, and if you get there quick enough, like literally, Marvel, she literally goes on like a mass like intercom basically and says, she's wicked, and she doesn't have a chance to say her case because she's like, you know, immediately made into this bad person because like press. So it's like, one, how important the media is, and two, like of framing people. But also just like that in history, that time will change or will be ever solidified in their history of the Wicked Witch was born, basically. And I think that with the professor, which by the way, Peter Dinklage, I know you're watching, love you. That the goat professor, it was trying to harp on like, we need to talk about this so that it isn't like, I don't think he said it was repeat yourself, but it's like, so we can learn and be better and not repeat ourselves, and like to understand how we got here because of what happened. And I think that just the idea of history and how maybe history isn't always correct, first of all, and second of all, maybe history needs to be taught, but it also needs to be challenged.
Yeah, and in terms of production, like the difference between the Broadway musical and the film adaptation, I did like their use of like, I don't know if it's a flash forward type vibe, but like they have the professor in a cage.
Oh, like the vision.
Yeah.
The visions,
and
yeah.
I think that was really powerful. One, to show like Elphaba's powers, but also two, to just like visually see how stressful of this moment was for Elphaba, and like why she cared so much about it, and like she could see like that future where they were silenced and locked in cages.
I think that if they didn't do the visions, that would have taken out a lot of it. It connected a lot of the dots for the audience.
You don't really understand it until you're actively seeing it. And like,
I think that happens a lot of times in history where it's like, oh, well, that's not going to happen. And then once it does, you're like, I could have done so much to help prevent this, and I didn't.
I mean, you think about the Holocaust and like the people in the concentration camps. Like
Hitler wasn't just overnight.
Yeah, like a lot of people just didn't walk by those. They didn't see what the conditions, so like they didn't really understand what was going on. So there wasn't change right away because you can't see it. You don't know what's going on.
It's just also another importance on like doing the research and doing the work of like, especially if it does not align with your beliefs, looking into it to maybe understand why other people would think that way. If there's no critical thinking and nobody ever challenges anything, how are you going to make change? Like, it brings back to the point of like, everybody is with the trodden and the rebels, if you will, and the resistance. They are always in it when it is like a movie, a book. But when it comes to real life, nobody wants to actually do that.
Yeah.
Wake up, sheeple! But yeah, I think that this movie, to tie it all together in a nice little bow, I think this movie has so many different concepts that can be taken in different contexts, and how there's so many lessons. It's not just one lesson of like, oh, I mean, there's a higher one of being like your looks are, don't judge a book by its cover kind of a thing, like, you know, but there's so many underlying like little roots that go into different things that can totally be argued.
Yeah.
So
it's very timely. I think just like overall, it was really well done, and I'm excited for part 2. I'm excited to see where it goes, and I think like no matter, like this was made in what, 2003? Like no matter what time we're watching it, it's always gonna be an important argument
relevant.
that we need to talk about and we need to, stand up for. And
it's just like it's a
learn
never-ending fight, yeah.
Never-ending fight.
Last note I want to say, when they brought out the original Alphaba and Glinda, I'm going to be honest, it was a very quick first glance at it. I thought it was Trisha Paytas and I almost freaked out. I said, no, they did not Ethan Slater, and now this? Oh no, but then I realized, and I was like, hey, that would make sense anyways. Thank God.
Be the biggest side eye to it.
I said, that is not her, please. But no, it wasn't. It was the original Alphaba and Glinda, and that was beautiful. And it was literally the perfect context because it was a play about how the Emerald City was made and how the Great Wizard got there, and it's like it's going back in time, and like who better to do it than the first ones, you know? And so I think that was really well done.
It was very beautiful, and
when they all went, so cool. There's a part of the scene where they where the one Alphaba goes with the new Alphaba, and then the other Glinda goes with the other Glinda, and it's just such like, oh, hug.
That was very refreshing for the people that are a big fan of the Broadway musical.
Mm-hmm. And it's also just like other movies will do like cameos of other people, and it's just like that was really random.
Yeah.
Like for example, in Free Guy, when Chris Evans all of a sudden was just there, I was like, that's like silly because it was like a little bit of a Marvel section, but it was just like kind of out of nowhere.
What are you doing here?
No hate to Free Guy or anything, but like it was just kind of, but like this made sense. It was applicable to the whole story, and it was like,
And it wasn't overdone. Like they were in and they were out, and they paid tribute to.
Yeah, it wasn't like
all those years and.
Exactly. It wasn't like a John Cena of it all, where it's like, oh, I'm John Cena, and then it's like the claps, and he's just standing there and staring and staring and staring. It's like it had purpose, and I think that is important. Any other parting thoughts?
I'm a big Wizard of Oz girly, so I went into it biased. I think it was 10 out of 10. Obviously, I can think about it critically and all that stuff, but
yeah,
I think
you can think about something critically and still like it.
And if no matter where you fell on the spectrum of whether you really liked it or you really hated it, like there was a lesson to be learned.
Thanks for tuning in to this. I spit yet again. I'm gonna lose
it. Spit count.
Thank you for tuning in again for this episode of Lexi and Raegan Tries. We love you guys. Thanks for watching. Thank you, Mom, for watching.
Subscribe. Tell us what we should do next.
Subscribe. Tell us what you want to see in the channel. Follow Pointer Studios on Instagram and TikTok as well. But yes, thank you, and may your future be limitless.
We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz.